Have you ever wondered what it would like to be blind? I remember as a child, I guess I was 4 or 5 years old. I don't know why I did this, but I would sometimes close my eyes and walk around the house, wondering if I could remember where the furniture was, wondering how many steps there were. I still do that. I know how many steps there are in each landing. Have you ever done that? I mean, I notice a lot of people kind of nod, and it must be kind of common. When I was a younger person, maybe 7 or 8, I remember going to parties and being blindfolded, and then doing the pin the tail on the donkey, or swinging the bat at the piñata. And one of our early youth activities that I remember was a trust walk. It's a common exercise to learn to put your life or your trust in someone else's hands, where you're blindfolded and then you're led by one of your contemporaries. And you learn very quickly who to trust and who not to trust. So we're going to read a story, a very familiar story. We've been in the Gospel of Mark for a couple of weeks. This story is also in Matthew and Luke. But only Mark tells the name of this blind person. And so let's read about blind Bartimaeus. Listen to God's word to you. Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet. But he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," said Jesus. "Your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let's pray together. Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for Bartimaeus. Thank you for Mark. Thank you for your Holy Spirit, that it would enable us to read this text thousands of years later and understand better how we might walk in faith and to see as Bartimaeus could see. May the words of my mouth, meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, our rock and our redeeming. Amen. So we've been in Mark, and if you remember from last week, we were talking about the difference between Jerusalem and Jericho, about 14 miles. Jericho is about northeast of Jerusalem, downhill. And so here we have Jesus and the disciples going back down to Jericho. Jesus is at the height of his popularity at this point. And wherever he goes, crowds of people are swarming him. And here's this crowd going down the street, and this blind beggar is sitting by the roadside. Now, the presence of a blind beggar on the side of a road, particularly right outside the gate of the city, is not uncommon in an area particularly which is followed by all the Jewish pilgrims going up to Jerusalem to the different festivals. It is the center of the religion. The temple is there. However common beggars were, beggars at that time were the forgotten people. They had left their family, their home. They were cast out. They were invisible. There are what I call cellophane people. because we learn to look right through them. And their only hope is that a stranger might come by and drop a coin in their hand, or maybe give them some food. And the situation is not unlike, I think, modern times where you have homeless people begging. When I was about 20 years old, so only about 19 years ago, just seeing if you're listening, 40 years ago, okay, 40 years ago, I was in New York City for the first time ever, down in Greenwich Village, of all places. And I was visiting a friend, and I went down the road, and there's a homeless guy, obviously homeless. Looked like he slept right there. And my heart went out to him. And I gave him what food I had in my backpack. And then I kept going, and there was another homeless one. And then there was another one. And then there were dozens of them, and there were hundreds of them. And I thought, and this just where I am walking in this city of millions. I was overcome, a young, naive little boy from a little town in South Carolina. This was not a common sight. And then after a few days of visiting my friend, I began to see these homeless people in a different way. I must have acquired something like X-ray vision, because I began to see right through them. I would even walk right over them as they were asleep on the sidewalk. You see, they had become invisible to me. They were cellophane people. Well, it can happen to any of us. It doesn't take long. In fact, it's quite easy. We just build up an immunity to eyesight. Instead of seeing an individual who is homeless, we see the homeless as a non-individual. Those people. Homeless people, not a man or a woman with a name. And like today's homeless people, beggars back then, in Jesus' days, were an embarrassment to everybody around. Think Russia Olympics. They weren't what residents wanted important visitors to see. And so blind Bartimaeus begins this disturbance, and he hears that this crowd is coming, and in the crowd is none other than Jesus of Nazareth. He's heard so much about Jesus. Blind doesn't mean you can't hear. So Bartimaeus cries out with a loud voice, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Now the Son of David is a messianic proclamation that no one else uses in the whole gospel. Only Bartimaeus. And it's a proclamation of faith in who Jesus Christ is as the fulfiller of prophecy. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Now you notice what Mark says everyone felt about this. They were embarrassed about this guy yelling over the crowd noise. And it says, many rebuked him and told him to be quiet. Well, probably like you, that just made him a little bit louder, didn't it? Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. He's not about to miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So Jesus finally hears Bartimaeus above the crowd, and he stops. And he tells his disciples to go call him. And so they tell Bartimaeus, and it's exactly what he was hoping to hear, and he doesn't waste a single second. He throws off his jacket and he jumps up and he gets someone to lead him to Jesus. And this was the moment. This was the climax. The crowd had grown immediately very still. Silence filled the air. Everyone's eyes were on Jesus, and they wanted to see what would Jesus do with Bartimaeus. And then Jesus asks a very unexpected question. The question certainly comes as a surprise, doesn't it? Everyone in the crowd already knew the answer. Can you imagine? Here Bartimaeus is probably led right up in front of Jesus. And Jesus gets right in his face, puts his hands right on his shoulders, and looking straight into those obviously blind, unseen eyes, he asks, Bartimaeus, what do you want me to do for you? Well, that's a packed question, isn't it? Is this a question like a genie and I get 3 wishes? Is this a question that is actually giving me an understanding of the power of the one who is asking it? That he could fulfill it? Just imagine for a moment that Jesus is right in front of you right now. He puts his hands on your shoulder. He looks you in the eye. And he says, what do you want me to do for you? What are you going to say? Your answer reveals as much about your values as it does where you stand in your relationship to Jesus. Would you have him change something in your personal family life? Perhaps improve your health? Maybe fix that financial situation you've gotten into? What would you have Jesus do for you? Well, can you imagine what Bartimaeus must have been thinking? Are you kidding me? I'm blind. It's obvious to everyone around. I'm blind as a bat. And then perhaps he does one of those quick self-reflection moments, one of those little microseconds where your life goes right in front of you. And he goes, now wait a minute. Surely nobody wants to be blind. Surely my life is all messed up because I can't see like everyone else can see. What do I want you to do for me? Rabbi, Master, I want to receive my sight. Jesus says, go your way. Your faith has made you well. And immediately Bartimaeus receives his sight and begins to follow Jesus. What a story. This extensive build-up, this life-changing question, this exciting crescendo, and then that's it. End of story. That's all Mark tells us about Bartimaeus in the gospel. You don't read anything more. Next verse is the next chapter, and Jesus is going right back to Jericho. This is where you and I have to do a little bit of insightful thinking. What would it be like if you were blind all your life, you'd always been blind, and then you received your sight for the very first time? I've always wondered what happened to Bartimaeus after this miraculous healing. So I fast forwarded a week, and I put myself in Bartimaeus' shoes, and I thought, okay, it's a lot harder to beg when you're not blind. And now the world expects me to be responsible. I can see just like everybody else. I got to take care of myself, get a job, earn the money that I am given. I can almost imagine Bartimaeus saying something like, wow, this seeing business isn't cracked up to be all it was meant to be, I thought it'd be great, but now I'm not so sure. And reflectively he ponders, how do you handle things when you can see? Now, do you ever wonder, I do, why stories like this little text are put right here in the gospel. Now, you know what's happening. We've been in Mark all month. You know Jesus is going to Jerusalem. You know he's going to get in trouble in Jerusalem. You know that he's going to be arrested, given a mock trial. You know he's going to be beaten, brought to humiliation. He's going to be tortured, and he's going to be crucified and killed. And suddenly, right in the middle of all this is a little story about this blind beggar on the side of the road near Jericho. What do you want me to do? I want to receive my sight. Go, your faith has made you well. Bartimaeus follows Jesus. Now, as so often is the case, I find, particularly in the Gospels, this story is more than just this story. Mark has put it here for a reason. And the reason is for the reader. And the reader is you and me. Mark is telling us something very important about ourselves. And I think the hidden truth in this text that Mark is trying to convey to us as the reader is that you and I are also blind. And before you roll your eyes and go, when's he going to quit talking? Think about it. Blind is probably the way that we want ourselves to be. Being blind isn't so bad. When you are blind, you don't have to see things the way they are. Right now, there's terrible terrorism in Central Africa, mostly coming out of Boko Haram, who just pledged allegiance to ISIS, the State of Islam, which we don't know what that means, but it is not good. With the dry months coming, there is going to be famine in the land and a lot of death. When you are blind, you aren't blamed for not seeing this. But when we are healed of our blindness, we begin to see things like terrorism and famine and innocent people in need. In America, human trafficking is a foreign word, but not really. Did you read the headlines last week? Adult, child, and sex trafficking is prominent right here in our own country, right here in Lancaster County. Now we can turn a blind eye, as we have for so long, but it's still there. It's a desperate and despicable situation, but one that is real and present. It's as if we can see right through these victims. Invisible, cellophane people. And when we are healed of our blindness, we see each of these people, especially those young girls who are abducted, the children, and we see them even as we see our own daughters. It breaks our heart. I saw a photo of an elderly woman in the newspaper the other day, sitting in front of her city apartment. I don't remember what the caption was underneath, but it could have read, bewildered, lonely, frightened. She lives in fear of leaving her apartment. And it's not because she doesn't have money. It's because she is afraid of the gangs of violent people who will do her harm when she walks on the city streets to go visit her friends or just to buy groceries. She is a prisoner in her own home. And when we are healed of our blindness, we see things like special needs of our elderly men and women around us. Now, Jesus is looking in your eyes this morning, saying, what do you want me to do? And when you think of it, it's really not that peculiar of a question, is it? The answer is what's very difficult. Plus, I believe that it's not a once-in-a-lifetime question. I think Jesus asks us every day, what do you want me to do for you? He just asked it 15 verses earlier to John and James, the very same words. He's asked that to you before. Do you remember? When you drove by that guy holding the sign over by Home Depot that said, we'll work for money? You didn't want to miss the light, so you just kept going. Remember that letter that you threw away, and it was to help support hungry children? And you tossed it in the trash. And then you had this kind of an ache in your gut later on that day. Do you remember that disheveled elderly man who you walked past when you were down at Central Market on Saturday, and he had his hand out hoping that you might put something in it, and you walked past? You remember? You see, Jesus will keep on asking you again and again and again and again. He'll keep asking until he gets a better answer to the question, what do you want me to do for you today? Until he hears an answer more like Bartimaeus. All right, Lord, I hear you. Master, let me receive my sight. That I may see each person as one for whom you have died, just as you did for me. Would you pray with me? Open our eyes that I may see, Lord, glimpses of truth that were meant for me. Amen.